And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 5 unique builds for 5 commanders where I take 5 commanders and try to build them in a maybe not so obvious way or just a unique, interesting way. Starting out this time with Mavinda, Student's Advocate, a commander that didn't get a whole lot of attention when it first came out and probably still isn't getting much attention. And I'm actually revisiting the way that I originally built this deck because that's the first thing I thought of when I saw this commander. So 2 and a white, Bird Advisor, 2/3 with flying. Pay 0. You may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs 8 more to cast this way. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Activate only once each turn. And of course, you still pay the spell's cost, timing rules still apply, all of that stuff. And I originally thought, okay, well, we want to be targeting our own stuff. And of course, this is doing a very similar thing to Feather. The one strategy that, again, you could do with Feather as well, funny enough, but I like here is the blinking thing. Blinking is going to be using, I mean, at least in white anyway, blinking is going to be predominantly instants and sorceries. I mean, pretty much entirely instants actually. And you're just going to get a free extra use out of them. That's it. So you would be doing a mono white blink deck here. You could do other stuff. I mean, you could throw in other cards that just work great with Mavinda, but essentially the deck is, I'm blinking my creatures, and of course you're going to be targeting your creatures all the time when doing that. You still can use the, if you have a swords in the deck, I mean, you're going to anyway, obviously. You can still cast your swords from your graveyard for 9 mana. That kind of sucks. So, but it is, having that possibility is pretty interesting. You're obviously just going to be reusing your blink spells from your graveyard all the time. And I think that's a pretty good strategy to go with Mavinda. Next up, Inquisitor Eisenhorn, 2 blue and a black human Inquisitor 2/3 from the Warhammer 40k set. You may reveal the first card you draw on each turn. As you draw it, whenever you reveal an instant or sorcery card this way, create Rukarumel, a legendary 4/4 black demon creature token with flying. And whenever Inquisitor Eisenhorn deals combat damage to a player, investigate that many times. So there is a few different directions you can go here. I think this is a pretty interesting commander. The that many times, as I say all the time, is a really important phrase. So I can, bump my commander's power, make a whole bunch of clue tokens if I want to. I wouldn't go that direction with this commander personally. I just think, you could. There's so many clue commanders out there nowadays, and most of them are better than this. That first ability is the real interesting one in my opinion. So you're going to reveal the first card you draw on each of your turns, and whenever you reveal an instant or sorcery card, and of course, pretty easy to build around that, right? You're just going to make sure you have a lot of instants of sorcery in your deck. You're going to create a 4/4 black demon creature token with flying. That's actually a really powerful ability. Now, of course, it's legendary. That's the downside here, but I think you can build around that. I think you could very easily make a deck here with Mirror Gallery, Mirror Box, Sakashima. What else? There's several ways in these colors, obviously, where you can get rid of the legend rule. And man, if you were just revealing the top card of your library every turn, and of course you could very easily stack the top of your library, manipulate the top of your library, all that. This is just every turn create a 4/4 black demon creature token. Sorry, first card each turn. So I can brainstorm on my opponent's turn, reveal the top card, and it's an instant sorcery, make a demon token, cast whatever on the next guy's turn, think twice or something, do it again, right? So pretty easy to build you really could just build a very Dimir control-y theme, which of course instants and sorceries do really well. You could very much do the I cast stuff on my opponent's turn as well, because you'd be doing that a lot to get more triggers, and then you just sit back. It would become a Tolron deck essentially, but just you also get to use black and you're making 4/4 demons instead of just drakes, right? And you just sit there playing a very controlling theme, just cranking out demon tokens and swarming your opponents with them. I think that's a pretty good deck. All right, Meren of Clan Nel Toth. And again, this was one of the original ideas for this series was I'm taking commanders that they're really popular And we obviously they don't need any more attention in the format. I'm talking about underwhelming commanders here a little bit as well, but I'm also talking about really popular commanders that are essentially just all built the same way, right? If you haven't seen it before, at the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's mana value is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return it to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. So the part that people overlook here a little bit is your commander's just getting a creature back out of your graveyard every single turn. So a real funny way to go with this commander is you're not really doing the dice triggers thing, right? You don't worry about getting experience counters at all. If you have 0 experience counters, I mean, you're going to get them eventually, but if you have 0 experience counters, what your commander is at the beginning of your end step, just return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which is already great. And there's a lot you can do there. And of course, there's other effects that you can put in the deck, like Oversold Cemetery and stuff like that, that will allow you to do it as well. There's a couple things you can do here, and this idea will play into actually the next commander I'm talking about as well. First of all, I think you could just do a cycling deck here. It wouldn't be the greatest cycling deck ever, but having creatures in the deck that you can cycle to your graveyard and then get them back on your end step, or transmute, even better. There is a fair amount of black transmute creatures in this deck. I don't know if people typically put transmute in their Meren decks, but you should. It is a great ability in the commander format all around because it's essentially tutoring, but I can transmute my Netherborn Phalanx into my graveyard, and then on my end step, I just get it right back to my hand and tutor for something else, right? Channel is another one, right? There's actually a decent amount of discard type of abilities that you can use with Meren, where I discard this card and then I get it back on my end step. Now, why would you want to do that other than just cheating stuff into play? Well, there's some other things we can build around here, right? The other things we can build around here is we can have stuff leaving our graveyard. And you could also, with that idea, build in the leaves the graveyard strategy as well. And again, I guess people could already be doing with this with their Meren, but you can throw in stuff like Insidious Roots, right? Stuff that is wanting stuff to leave your graveyard. Amzu, the insect commander, will do that. Of course, Tormod, sort of the original, is going to do that as well. So you're doing a combination of ideas here. And while we're on that idea, you can do all of that with Glissa the Traitor as well. This is another one that, in fact, I think this is even better because this is not just an end step trigger. You're going to be doing it a lot, right? So if you haven't seen it before, black, green, Phyrexian Zombie Elf 3/3, first strike and death touch. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. And of course, having your opponent's creatures dying is going to be happening all the time in a commander game, even if you're not building around it. I mean, obviously you can put removal in here. You can even put, I donate creatures to my opponents, right? Having your opponents make creature tokens, all that kind of, like you could put a Freaka in this deck very easily. I probably would put a Freaka in my Glissa deck, Akron Horse, stuff like that, right? You can very easily donate creatures to your opponents to have them die. So getting those dice triggers, it for sure is going to be a lot better than just on your end step. It's probably going to be happening quite a bit. And whenever that happens, you're going to get an artifact back out of your graveyard to your hand. Here, it's a little less obvious that you would be doing that, and I would build even more around that theme. Obviously, you're going to need artifacts, but so what, right? You just have some artifact, and again, we can do the cycling thing here. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of artifacts that have cycling, but you can cycle your artifact into your graveyard and then just have an opponent's creature die, get it back, trigger your Insidious Roots or your Amzu or your whatever, your Tormod, and just, you're getting tons of value. And you just sit back, discarding. I mean, you would need a lot of discard outlets. You could have like a commander sphere that you sacrifice. Obviously, that would work just to make sure you have artifacts in your graveyard, right? That's actually probably the most important part here with this build is because I constantly am returning stuff from my graveyard to hand, or I want to be to trigger all this leaves the graveyard stuff, I'm going to have to make sure I can put stuff into my graveyard, artifacts, right? So artifacts that sacrifice, artifacts that cycle, artifacts that, I don't know, is there any channeling? Maybe not. You know, it could be tough there having artifacts that do that kind of stuff, but just having discard outlets, right? Just being able to easily discard stuff into your graveyard or entomb stuff as well will work here. And just getting all those triggers, I think I think there's enough in black and green colors to actually build a deck around here. You know, there's like 4 or 5 cards, which is pretty good. For me, that's sort of the threshold when building a deck is, do I have enough to actually build around here? I mean, there's the one guy, the Warhammer guy, who actually wants artifacts to be leaving your graveyard. So obviously, again, that's probably a card that you would put in every Glissa the Traitor deck. If you already have a Glissa the Traitor deck and that guy's not in there, he probably should be. So he's definitely going in there. And then all the other ones as well. That's enough, right? That for me, like 5, 6 cards that are doing this specific thing is enough of a threshold for me to actually start building my deck around. I mean, your commander's still going to do stuff. Even if you don't have those leaves the graveyard triggers in play, your commander's still doing a thing, right? Kill your opponent's creatures, get artifacts back. It's still good value, right? So you're not missing out. You're just not getting as much value as you could if you had that other stuff in play, right? So Glissa the Traitor, leaves the graveyard triggers is essentially what you're going for here. And I'm going to end off with a Rukarumel Biologist, a commander I wasn't super excited about when I first saw. Another sort of 5-color commander in the tribal theme. But, of course, a commander like this does open itself up to very fringe ideas. And I'm going the fringiest of the fringe here. I think I am anyway. So white, blue, black, red, and a green human wizard 3/3. As Rukarumel Biologist enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Slivers you control and non-token creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to their other creature types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And you can pay 3 and tap, create a 1/1 colorless sliver creature token. So I guess there's probably a lot of ways to build this commander, but essentially what you're doing is you're just building around whatever that creature type is, right? What's that specific creature type that I'm going to build around with this commander that is going to make my other creatures, mostly my slivers. Like I would say that, you know, the way I would probably build this deck is I would just make a sliver deck and then what's the other creature type that I want to add in, right? And for me, I'm going to find this really janky, underwhelming, I would say, certainly, but super fringe, super janky. Not a lot of people are aware of it. Creature type that will work really, really nicely here. And that creature type is chimera. That's right. There's not a lot of chimeras, and you could definitely throw some in the deck, but you wouldn't need to. You would only need to throw a few very specific cards in the deck. There are a series of cards, sort of. There is 4 of them. They are originally from Visions, and they're all artifact creatures. I've talked about them on my channel before. If you're ever doing the changeling or creature type changing strategy, they are worth giving consideration for. So Brass Talon Chimera, 4 mana artifact creature chimera, 2/2, has first strike. You can sacrifice it to put a +2/+2 counter on target chimera. It gains first strike. This effect lasts indefinitely. So I guess if they had made these cards today, they probably would give a first strike counter. So of course, we can put these counters on our slivers, right? That's why this works here. All of our slivers are going to be chimeras, so it allows you to sacrifice this to put the +2/+2 counter and the first strike ability essentially on any of your slivers. Continuing on, we have Ironheart Chimera, which is going to do the exact same thing, except also give vigilance. Lead Belly Chimera is going to do the exact same thing, except it's going to give trample along with the +2/+2 counter. And Tin Wing Chimera will be doing the same thing, but with flying. And the reason why I think you could actually build a deck around this is because this is a sacrifice, and you could just also put into the deck a way to get them back out of the graveyard, right? If you have a way to cast these or resurrect these from the graveyard, you could just keep reusing them every single turn. Of course, any sort of get stuff back out of the graveyard or recursion effect is going to be good in any deck, particularly good in a heavy creature theme. So if I threw a Dawn of the Dead, for example, in this deck, 2 black, black, black enchantment at the beginning of your upkeep, lose 1 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature gains haste until turn, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So that's pretty good in any recursion theme or any creature deck at all, because you just get another kick at the can with one of your creatures. But with this strategy, it's particularly good because this is not Unearth where it says exile instead of putting it anywhere else. If you sacrifice the creature right away, that means you can do it again the next turn. So if I have my Tin Wing Chimera, I sacrifice it, put a +2/+2 counter, and give flying to one of my slivers that I have in play, and then the next turn I can return it to play with Dawn of the Dead and do it again, and then keep repeating that process, right? So any repeatable recursion, mass recursion, anything like that means I can keep reusing those effects over and over and over again. That's kind of why I like it here. It's a funny fringe, neat, very unique, and very original, I think, idea that you can do with Rukarumel. Again, I would probably just do slivers. So, you'd put the typical slivers that you would in a deck. That's one of the things I don't love about Rukarumel is, okay, well, slivers are already doing the tribal thing already. They don't really need a lot of help. But if you were going to add something into your Rukarumel deck that's a little more unique and interesting, I think this whole chimera idea is one that will work and will be a little more interesting maybe than what you typically would see. All right, there you go. 5 more unique builds for 5 different commanders. Again, as usual, some of these are pretty fringe. Some of them are actually just a great way to build these commanders. Like I would say with both Mavinda and Inquisitor Eisenhorn, I would say those are just the ways that I would go when building those commanders, right? They're a little more underwhelming, not very popular. And if you were looking for a reason to build those commanders, here's some ideas that you might want to run with. Let me know in the comments below if you're going to run with any of these ideas yourself. That's it for today, and thanks for tuning in.